Hi, good evening, everybody. Hey, bookworms, and welcome to Fully Booked Chats. Tonight, we're joined by Jessie Sutanto, author of Dial A for Aunties and its sequel, Four Aunties and a Wedding, which is coming out this month. So let's talk about Jessie for a quick minute. Jessie grew up going back and forth between Jakarta and Singapore and considers both places her home. She received her master's in creative writing from the University of Oxford. Jessie is passionate about women's rights and diversity in publishing, and is especially interested in helping writers from marginalized communities. If you have any questions for her, please feel free to type them in the comment section, and we'll do our best to answer them. So, my name is Reina Regina, and I'll be your host for this evening. I'm at Reina X Regina on Instagram, and I'm an indie author, tarot creator, and a fully booked reading ally. I reviewed Dial A for Aunties last year, and it's my pleasure to talk to you about Four Aunties and a Wedding tonight. So don't forget, both titles, Dial A and Four Aunties, are available on fullybookedonline.com for 15% off, only from March 25th to March 27th. So without further ado, let's welcome Jessie Sutanto.
Hi everyone. Hi, Irina.
Hi, Jessie. So how are you, and where are you calling us from today?
I'm really good, thank you. I am actually in Jakarta, Indonesia. So I think we're an hour behind you guys. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, that's so cool. I've been watching you on our Instagram account all week and your tweets and stuff. So, shall we dive right in into talking about your new book?
Yes, sure.
Okay, cool. So, to get started, Dial A for Aunties and Four Aunties in a Wedding are fantastic books that touch on many genres. So we have murder mystery, we have rom-com, and we've got family drama. So when you started writing the first novel, was the multi-genre route the plan, or did these individual threads come up organically?
I actually wasn't thinking about it being like multi-genre. I actually wrote it as like a rom-com but with murder, and then of course I guess as I started to write, the murder kind of like took center stage, and I kind of realized like, oh yeah, I should have seen that coming, because it would be hard to have that as like a subplot instead of like the main plot, and then the romance ended up like taking a backseat to the murder. So it just kind of happened like naturally.
Cool. So could I just say I really, really love Dial A because it felt like um, there was murder and then something after that and something after that and then another, and all the way until the end there was just like a box full of surprises. So for those of us who are fans of your book, I'd like to like really thank you for giving us a good time and getting to discover all those little threads in your book. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That means so much.
Great, thank you. So, on to our next question. The plot of both books unfolds during a wedding. So, is there a particular reason why you chose this setting?
Yeah, so weddings are like my favorite setting ever. If I see that like a book or a movie is set in a wedding, it's like an auto, buy for me. And I was actually a wedding photographer when I was living in England. And so it was very like natural, that I was like, oh yeah, the main character can be a photographer. So I don't need to like do any research into what her job would require and stuff like that. Like I would know all of that already, and I'm already so like familiar with the world of weddings. So yeah, it just came really easily.
That's amazing. I don't think that was in your bio. That was like so. I have so much to say. I would say so much if we weren't live. But moving on, it's kind of amazing how both books were able to set up a hilarious comedy of errors. And given like the setting is a wedding, there's just so much room for disaster
Mhm.
on a normal day. And then you
Mhm.
toss murder into the mix. So, at one point, did you ever find yourself like having to go back to the drawing board because maybe a plot point might have been too much, or maybe you'd written yourself into a corner or anything like that?
Yeah, so I at about like 70% of the book, I got very stuck because I had only plotted it like up to that point, and you know the general rule of writing is that you should think of like the worst case scenario for your characters and then do that. And that's what makes like an interesting book because the stakes just keep like rising and rising. But at that time, I was like, oh, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I realized like, well, it's that, you know, they get found out by like everyone and the cops get involved and they all go to prison. That is the worst case scenario. Um, but I was like, oh no, but that's not the book I want to write. You know, I don't want it to be like sad.
Yeah,
And
or
so I
like
had to
a
really,
courthouse trial drama.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It would have been like a really different book. And I just knew like I wanted it to leave people feeling happy and uplifted. So I was like, oh my God, how do I do that? So I had to really like stop and think about, you know, how to kind of wrestle my characters out of like the huge trouble that they've gotten themselves into.
So, but was this the same for both Dial A and for Four Aunties? Because there's a bit of murder in each, but they're two very different stories.
Mm-hmm. So when I wrote Four Aunties and a Wedding, so one of my friends told me when I was writing Dal A, actually, she was like, "Oh, why don't you think about it as a movie and think of like if you know this were on the screen, what would you like to see next?" And that actually really helped me because I was like, "Oh, I want like a huge you know wedding scene." And you know like a lot of like glamour and like big things happening. And so when I was plotting Four Aunties and a Wedding, I kept that in mind and I was like, okay, remember like what do I want to see, you know, on the screen if this were a movie? And so I kept that in mind and it was so helpful because it really helped me to kind of figure out, you know, what kind of like climax scene I wanted and stuff like that. So yeah.
Wow, that's actually a really great writing tip. And now that you mention it, I
Mm-hmm.
do feel how it plays out in my head as a movie, like the
Yes.
pacing and the
Yes.
cuts between different
Mm-hmm.
scenes. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
o- okay, since you mentioned that you were a wedding photographer, so maybe that implies a little like drawing on your own experiences when writing the characters and the events in your book. And I did see the bit about uh,
Mm-hmm.
your husband's family background being similar to Nathan's. So, did you
Mm-hmm.
base any of the in-law interactions in the novel on your own experiences?
Mm, yeah. So with Four Aunties and a Wedding, I really wanted to show, you know, different immigrant experiences. But my husband's like parents, they're not as horrible as Nathan's mom. So I had to like you know increase the drama for like the sake of the book. But you know, in real life, my husband's parents are really nice, but just really different. Like even though his mom is actually Singaporean, and I grew up in Singapore. You know, my parents spend a lot of time in Singapore, and so we were all like my parents were very excited to meet her. And then when they actually met her, she was actually really like very English. She had lived in England for a very long time and kind of forgotten everything about Singapore. And so it was like a very difficult first meeting because everyone was just very confused by each other. Uh, so I really wanted to show that confusion and like, hang on, we're supposed to be the same, but yet we're not. Like we're so different, and I wanted to really put that down on the page.
I I did get that very much, and I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate it so much when you say things like, "Okay, this is a book about Asians, but not all Asians are the same." Or
Mm-hmm.
this is about Southeast Asians, but even
Mm-hmm.
then, it's not all the same.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to Four Aunties, and it's like, okay, we're talking about the Asian diaspora, and even the immigrant experience is not going to be the same because some people will
Yeah.
like, um, what do you call that?
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll acclimate into the culture that
Mm-hmm.
they're melding into, and the other
Mm-hmm.
half will cling to their original culture, and it's just
Yeah.
I love that there's a celebration of these different experiences, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't just generalize, oh, because you're Asian, you're this cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, jumping off of that, let's talk about how Asian families are represented in both your novels.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was interesting about Maddie and her auntie's dynamic was the fact that it was so nuanced, showing both the positive and the negative aspects of belonging to an Asian family, although it does lean towards a positive depiction overall. So, was this something that you found that needed to be highlighted, and why?
Um, so, because it was something that I really struggled with all of my life, so my cousins and I pretty much grew up in different countries from our parents. So we all moved to Singapore when we were very young. And our parents did so. The Asian upbringing is like so strongly ingrained in us. And when we then all moved overseas, um, especially like non-Asians would not quite understand it. A lot of like the Asian family aspects. So like my cousins and I would complain to one another, about like how our parents never respected our privacy and stuff like that. And then I remember like our white friends being like, "Yeah, God, your parents are terrible," and then we would all be like, "Oh, like what did you say like about our parents?
You can't say that.
Like how dare you?"
How dare
And
you?
then yeah, and then they're like, "What? I'm so confused, but like you've been complaining all this time about that exact thing, and I'm just like reaffirming you." And I would feel really judged by them and like really misunderstood. Um, and so it felt so precarious to me. Like I just felt like I could never talk honestly, like to my non-Asian friends about like anything bad that my parents did. Even though like every culture will have a negative, like negatives and positives, but I felt like I couldn't share it honestly with them because then they would just think like, "Oh my God, yeah, like your culture is terrible." Um, yeah, so then when I wrote the book, I was like, "Oh, I really want to, I want to be honest, but I also want to highlight that at the end of the day, I love the culture, and like so much so that my husband is English, and like we chose to move from England to Indonesia to raise our kids, within this culture." So I really wanted to like highlight that at the end of the day, it is a very positive experience.
Yeah, I totally get it.
Mm.
You know, as I'm not saying that all Asians are the same because that was the point of the book, but
Mm-hmm.
as a Filipino, I totally get um the whole overbearing parent, they don't
Mm-hmm.
respect your privacy kind of thing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and they guilt you into
Yeah.
doing this and that.
Yeah.
But um, like you said, it happens in every culture, and there is like good parenting and bad parenting in any culture, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just so refreshing to see ours
Mm-hmm.
as Southeast Asians or as Asians
Mm-hmm.
reflected in the book,
Mm-hmm.
and to remind people that no matter how obnoxious our parents may get,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's still the universal feeling of love and wanting your kid to have the best of life, which is why they're like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so last question about the book before we move on to questions about you. In Four Aunties in a Wedding, you mentioned wanting to discuss the Asian diaspora and how that's not a homogenous experience, as we've been discussing for the past couple of questions. So, was there a reason you decided to focus on this particularly?
Um, I felt like with Dial A for Aunties, I was very scared of like showing, these people as like a stereotype, because they were like speaking, the aunties, they speak English, and I just wanted to make sure that people weren't like, reading the books and then taking away from it. This is, how all Asians speak, and so now I can like, imitate the way that Asians speak, and like I feel like
Yeah,
a lot of
no.
people might be like very well meaning, but still end up like um, taking it, in that way. And so I really, I thought, okay, once I get the chance to, um, really highlight the differences, then I will. So then I was like, oh yeah, like in the next book, I can do that. I can show um, Asians who have truly assimilated into where they moved to. So I guess yeah, that was the reason. Like I just wanted to really highlight that it's not all Asians are alike.
Yeah, awesome. So, thank you for that. As as Asians who move in international spaces, thank you for that. Okay, so shall we move on to the set of questions that are about you? So you're currently based in Jakarta, Indonesia, and you mentioned at the start of Dial A that you were displaced from your country of origin and your parents because of unrest and conflicts during Suharto's term. Do you ever feel like you are still rediscovering Indonesia now because you lived abroad for many years?
Yeah. So I moved away from Indonesia when I was 7 years old. So my Indonesian is still like a 7 year old like vocabulary. Like I can't understand the newspaper like articles. They're so like, they're written very formally, and I'm like I read them and I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea what this is talking about. And I really do feel like I missed out on a lot of things, like pop culture, the informal, like and and a
Like
lot
how
of
the
like
language
Indonesian history.
evolved into slang and
Yes,
stuff.
yes, yeah, exactly. And a lot of like Indonesian history. I think I actually know more about Singaporean history than Indonesian history because at 7, you haven't really learned that much about like history lessons. So when I moved to Singapore, we learned all about Singaporean history. And I was very, very into it. And I lived in Singapore for so long that I felt like I was more Singaporean. So coming back to Indonesia, I feel like I know very little. And I'm still rediscovering it like until now. So yeah, it's such a complicated process.
So, wow, that must be such a it must be such a journey though
Mhm.
to like leave where you came from and then go somewhere else and feel like you're part of that place and then come back. But also,
Yeah.
um, oh no, I feel like I might spoil the ending of Four Aunties if I keep talking. But but yeah, I love that.
Okay.
I love that you were able to like reflect um that feeling of being
Mhm.
adrift in your own culture in the books. Because I feel like
Mhm.
a lot of people who have um moved away from their
Mhm.
countries of origin would relate to that very strongly. Um, but that's getting a little deep.
Mhm.
So I'll pull us up a little. So the books are very funny for reals, which is why I feel that a lot of readers have enjoyed going through this journey with Medi and her aunts. And you clearly have a gift for comedy. I mean,
Yay.
you post auntie sketches on your TikTok, which are funny and relatable for those of us raised in Asian families. So where do you think you got your sense of humor, and where do you get the confidence to commit to this comedic voice?
Uh, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know. Like I didn't start out writing humor. I started out writing very dark suspense stories. So I never thought that I could do humor or anything.
Oh,
I
hence the
do.
murder.
I've always read a lot of humor because my favorite. Okay, did we lose? And so I think I just read a lot of books that are really funny, and it just came really naturally. But I didn't start writing humor until my seventh book, actually. So I never even thought of it. Um, so I don't know about like the confidence, but I also feel like the Aunties books are like payback, for me having to deal with like my ridiculous family for like over 30 years.
We can relate. I mean, at family reunions, there's always going to be like one younger family member impersonating the older ones. So
Mhm.
I, I mean, and that's all we get, at a party, we'll do that. But
Yeah.
you took payback a step further and immortalized your aunts and your family members' antics in your books. So I love that. And I I also didn't know that you wrote darker stories. So I guess that's where the murder
Yes.
jumped in the middle of all the comedy.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's jump to your family real quick. What did your actual family think of the book? And do you have any family members who had something to say about the novel?
So my mom was the first one in the family to read it, aside from my husband. So she read it. She was very excited to read it because she actually has three sisters herself. And she read it and she was like, well, this is not at all like me and my sisters. And she was like, I thought that they were based on us. And I was like, no. Like I had to kind of mix up everyone's like personalities. No one can recognize themselves. And I was like, okay, so for example, like the mom character is actually based on dad. And then my mom was like, oh my God, she so is. Like, she is so your dad. And I was like, yeah. And then I was telling her like who like each auntie was actually, mostly based on. And she was like, oh my God, she is totally based on that. And so I was very happy to know like even my mom couldn't figure out like who was, whom.
Who is who?
And yeah. So fortunately or unfortunately, most of my parents' generation don't understand enough English to like read the book. So my aunts and uncles have not actually read the book, but my cousins have, and they say that they like it, and none of them like recognize their own parents. So that's good.
At least that keeps you safe. And I forgot to check
Hmm.
if there was like a clause here that says, was that um any resemblance to actual people
Oh,
is a coincidence.
I don't know actually. I can't remember if there is.
I'll check for you. I think there is.
Okay.
Yeah, any resemblance to actual persons living or dead is entirely coincidental.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Okay, well at least they don't know.
Yes.
Um, so moving on, other Asian authors have mentioned that they feel pressure in representing not just their families but their culture accurately. So is that
Mhm.
something that you also wrestle with?
Yeah, for sure. That's why in my author's note, I believe I ended it with something like, this book is not representative of like the entire Asian community because it's so huge. Like, like don't expect any single book to, represent the entire
Be
uh,
exactly like
culture.
you.
Yeah. Um, what's really interesting is that I actually find it hard to read books from like written by like authors of East or Southeast Asian descent, because like I've just been so hungry for representation that when I do read books from like other Southeast Asian or East Asian authors, I end up being like very disappointed because I'm like, oh, that's not exactly my experience. Um, so I understand that like there's so much expectation because we haven't had, any representation, or we've had very little. And I was talking to my friend uh, who is like ethnically Indian, and she was like, "Oh my god, that's also, like that's the exact same reason why I can't read, books by Indian authors like with Indian characters because I just feel like, well, that's not my exact experience, and now I feel really sad." But like she can read books from like Taiwanese authors, and she'll be like, "Oh my god, I relate so hard to this." And I feel the same way. Like I read a lot of books by Indian authors, and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is exactly like my culture. Like I'm connecting so hard with this material." So it's a very complicated feeling, I think, and I think it will get better, with the increase in representation. So then we no longer feel this pressure of like this one book needs to like represent everything about
Tick all the
me.
boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what? I never thought of it that way, but I also, now that I'm looking back, I do feel the same. Like when I read books about
Hmm.
um, Filipino culture, or books
Hmm.
written by other Filipino authors who are
Hmm.
somewhere abroad, somewhere here, and it never feels
Hmm.
quite right because I don't feel represented, or I'm like, oh, that's
Yeah,
just this trope or that trope,
yeah,
and real
yeah,
people aren't like that. But I
yeah,
can like I enjoy your books very much,
yeah,
and I enjoy other
yeah.
Asian authors' books very much. So
Hmm.
I feel like that is kind of a phenomenon going on
Yeah.
with readers and writers of color. And
Hmm.
I do think you're right in the sense that I think mathematically, the more of us that are out there writing
Hmm.
about our experiences, at least so like you'll hit half of what I'm experiencing, and another author will hit the other half.
Yeah,
So I feel like
yeah, exactly.
the representation will be more whole. Yeah. So jumping off of
Yeah.
that, you
Hmm.
are the first writer of color to ever win the Comedy Women in Print Prize. So how does it feel to be given this acknowledgement and at the
Yeah.
same time to be representing Asian women writers?
Um, it was so unreal. And I remember the day after, I found out that I won, my husband said to our 6-year-old, he was like, your mom is certified the funniest female writer in like an entire country. And I was like, oh no, he's just exaggerating. And then my husband turned to me and he was like, I'm actually not exaggerating. Like, it's literally like you are certified the funniest female writer in the UK. And I was like, oh my God, that's true. Like, he is not exaggerating. And then yeah, and then like it hit me like, that's amazing.
Here's a piece of paper and a
Yeah,
trophy that says that's objective fact.
yeah. So that's so
Congratulations.
crazy. Yeah, thank you. I still feel like it hasn't really like I haven't received my trophy because of course, it got detained at Indonesian customs. So maybe it'll feel more real once like I am actually holding
Once you
hands.
have it.
Yes.
Congratulations on being funny. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your work. Okay, so last few questions from me. What's your advice for any young person in an Asian family who wants to strike that balance between finding their autonomy while also being faithful to their familial ties?
Oh my gosh, this is like a really big like responsibility. This is so difficult.
I
You
feel
know,
you.
I feel like oh, but this is so difficult to achieve. But like, I feel that um, I didn't really strike that balance until I gained financial independence from my family, which is so difficult, and it's is a real struggle, right? Because like the economy is so difficult, especially for like young people. But I
Yeah.
do feel like um, being financially dependent on our family is such a big thing. And like my parents, I felt like they continued seeing me as like a child up until I was able to be like, oh look, you know you no longer need to like do anything for me. And in fact, I can we can take you out for a treat, and like repay, like start repaying the for all of the things that they've done for us. And I that's really the thing that has shifted our family dynamics to the point where I feel like my parents started respecting me as like an adult and stuff like that. Yeah.
It really is a struggle with like, especially
Yeah.
for Asian cultures where we live
Yes.
with our parents until
Yes.
we get married
Mm-hmm.
or we move out. Like it's not in
Yes.
our culture to move out at 18 or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
to have them
Mm-hmm.
recognize us as adults and then to have a
Yeah.
relationship with us as adults.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I wish everyone going on this journey good luck. And
Mm-hmm.
there's really no formula to do it because
Yeah.
like every Asian is different, every parent is
Mm-hmm.
also different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I hope in listening to Jesse's
Yeah.
advice that you can pick up something that will help you on your journey out of there. So, last question about you and the book before we move on to audience questions. So, Dial A for Aunties is being adapted into a Netflix film. I am very excited for that. So, can you talk about the journey of this book being adapted for film? And is this something that you're very involved with or that you're excited about?
So the way that like we sold the film rights was so fast. And I remember like my friend who had kind of gone through a similar process, but not as like as fast as this, was being very concerned and was like, oh, don't be disappointed, disappointed if it like will fall expecting, or like producers to come back and be like, oh, sorry, like we couldn't actually get a studio backing. But then they did, and then it went to auction with like all these massive studios, and then obviously like Netflix won it. So it has been amazing. So I'm just like so excited, but I'm trying to forget about it because I don't want to be just like waiting and being like, oh my god, where's the next like update gonna be? But so far it's been good. They have a script, which we are expecting any day now. They've been going back and forth with Netflix with like edits and everything, so we should be getting it now. And I did hear from my producers who said that they're already looking into casting. So, so I'm like so excited about that.
Will you get any say in like how the film will look? Will be cast?
So as I understand it, as executive producer, you get like consultation. So I think like you can make suggestions, but they don't have to go with it. So I'm keeping my expectations very low in terms of which suggestions of mine might make it, because I don't really know anything about films. So I'm like, okay, like you guys know best. So
Yeah, just enjoy the ride.
yeah,
I mean,
yes.
not everybody gets to do this, and it's a once in a lifetime
Mhm.
thing. So
Yeah,
congratulations! Very excited for that whenever that will come out.
thank
So,
you.
um, that concludes the bit where we have questions from us, fully booked. So we'll move on to questions from the audience. So, first up, are there any? Okay, a lot of writers say that comedy is one of the hardest things to write. Wh- What would your tips for someone who wants to? What are your tips for someone who wants to inject comedy in their story? From Ilya Irene.
So it is really difficult. I actually do agree that yeah, it is one of the hardest things to write, because I've written like the dark suspense, and then I've written like the comedic books, and I find the comedic ones harder. um, but I would say like what's most important for comedy to really hit home is the authenticity. And I feel like the success of Dial A for Aunties is because I just know my source material so well, the Asian aunties, because I grew up with them. And oh my god, like just a couple of months ago, I got really bad food poisoning, and I had to go to like the hospital to get like hooked up to an IV. I don't know if this happens a lot in the Philippines, but it happens a lot in Indonesia.
Oh, it
Um,
does.
yeah, so it's like a really normal, like, oh yeah, like I just need an IV drip, and then they like hook you up right away. And so I was just like lying there, and then this random auntie who like I didn't even know. She like popped her head between the dividers, and she's like, I heard that you have like really bad diarrhea. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, you should like be more careful about what you eat. Oh my gosh, she's like a complete stranger. And she like started like lecturing me, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Cause I would never talk back to my elders. So and she was like, be more careful, and you need to like drink more water and blah blah blah. Like she was giving so much advice, and I was like, I tweeted about this, and of course, like non-Asians were like, "What? I can't believe that happened." But all the Asians and Middle Easterns and uh, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, this is so totally what some middle-aged stranger would do in my country." And anyway, I was like, I'm definitely gonna like put this into book 3 or book 4. But so I
I
feel
love that
like
there's a book 3 and a book 4 in the
yeah.
works.
but I just feel like, it hits home because it's just based on truth. And I think that when you are writing authentically, it's going to really connect with everyone, even if they're like outside of your own culture. And that would be like my biggest tip.
Thank you for that. That's actually really great. And definitely big relate to the total stranger commenting on your life sort of thing.
Mhm.
O- Okay. Is there a second question from the audience? Oops. What's the favorite scene you wrote in the book from Charmaine Buenafe?
So the my favorite scene, hands down, is when Medi comes home with like the dead body, and her mom calls her aunts, and then they like start discussing. Like that was my favorite scene, especially when Medi is reading like the chat messages between her mom and the blind date that she just killed. So that one, like I actually
The eggplant emoji.
laughed out loud like several times. Yes. I actually laughed out loud like several times as I was writing it. So yeah, that was my favorite one.
That is one of the highlights of reading Dial A for me as well. Like this boy is so nice, he's gonna cook you an eggplant. And I'm like, no. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Charmaine, for your question. Do we have a third? What was the hardest part of the writing process for this book for you? From Claudia de Silva.
So the hardest part with LA for Aunties is that I had never really like written a rom-com up until then. And so I kept questioning myself like every step of the way, like, oh, am I following, am I doing this right? Because it feels very different from all of the rom-coms that I have been reading and researching to prepare for this book. And then finally, I just had to be like, oh, you know what? Like, if I write like the worst rom-com in the history of rom-coms, then so be it. It's fine. Um, and then the worst, like the hardest part of like Four Aunties and a Wedding is it was my first ever sequel that I had ever written, and I didn't realize like just how difficult that would make it because so this author described it so well. She said that like the first book is you building like a sandbox for yourself with all these wonderful tools that you can play with, and it's so good and it's so fun. And then the second book is when you find out that you're trapped inside the sandbox and nobody can hear your screams.
That's so fun.
I
That's
yeah,
perfect.
I felt that. Yeah. I felt that so hard with like Four Aunties and a Wedding.
I was I was reading for aunties until like very very early morning. So I was gonna say
Oh.
late night, but it's early morning here now. And then I was reflecting on how different they were, like in terms of pace and like the general flavor. Because with Dial A, it's like, okay, I will introduce you to my world. Here are my crazy aunts, one, two, my mom, and then four. And then by the time we get to Four Aunties, it's like, okay, we know all these people, and then we're
Uh-huh.
tossed into
Yeah.
um a different environment, different setting, but they how
Mhm.
are these people that you already know going to act? So
Mhm.
yeah. Um I definitely I can definitely feel that this one was a sequel. Like it had that
Yeah.
sequel flavor.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have a fourth question from the audience? Okay, I think this will be our last. From Jimenez Professor, what's your writing routine? Which I know we saw a bit of in your stories this week.
Mhm. So I used to be very particular about like my writing routine. This was before I had kids. I would be like, um, I'm like, oh, well, I need to, have like just the right tea or, and it has to be like, exactly like this and that. Like, and it would take me like hours and hours and hours. But then now I have kids, so it's very like unromantic, I guess. Yeah, like I wake up, I like get them out of the house, and then I'm like, oh my God, I have to write now. And then I just like write. And and then that's it. Like I spend less than 2 hours writing, and then I have to like rush off everywhere, looking after the kids and trying to like exercise and all that stuff. So I've learned to be like super efficient. But I guess in a way it's really good because I realize actually that I burn out less ever since I started doing this because I'm spending a lot less time writing. So then my mind is on other things throughout the day. I'm not just like thinking about writing. Whereas in the past, I'd be like kind of subconsciously just like working on the writing, even though I'm like doing other things. So now I don't do that anymore, and I actually find it healthier. So I would recommend that, like limiting your writing time to like under 2 hours if you can.
I relate to this very much. They used to say when you're staring at the window, you're still writing. So you're just constantly writing every waking moment.
Yeah,
So yeah, thank you so much for telling
yeah.
us that it's okay to just limit that to a
Mhm.
certain window every day, and then for the rest of the day, go
Mhm.
ahead and live your life.
Yes.
How would you write your books if you're not actually living life, right?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, so thank you so much to our audience for all their questions. Before we wrap up, we have a short game round. So, for we have two games, one where I do fast talk and one where I ask you other questions. So let's
Mhm.
do fast talk first. So I'll ask
Mhm.
you like a quick question and then just give me a quick answer. Don't overthink, just off the top of your head.
Mhm.
So, Fast Talk Southeast Asian Edition. What is your go-to street food?
Oh, martabak in Indonesia.
Ooh, what's that?
It's like this really huge pancake, and then they like load it up with condensed milk and butter and grated cheese, which sounds really weird, like cheese in a dessert, but it works so well. And like peanuts and sesame
Oh,
seeds, and
I
it's
get
so
it.
good. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like a dream. I will definitely try that
Mhm.
if I go to
Yes.
Indonesia. So, no,
Mhm.
number two, favorite way to keep cool on a hot day?
Going inside an AC room. I know it's so like environmentally unfriendly, but oh my gosh, like the heat in Southeast Asia is like no joke because it's like so humid too. So,
It's 36 degrees where we are, so I
yeah.
have two ACs running at the moment.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
So, what is your favorite object or appliance most commonly found in Southeast Asian homes?
Oh, I don't know what like applies. The rice cooker. Talking to my white friend, and she was like very shocked to know that there's like an appliance that's solely for like cooking rice. And I was like, yeah, like every household in Asia has it. Like I don't even know how to cook rice without a rice cooker. I didn't even know that that was possible actually. And she was like, really? And I was like, yes, really.
Yes. Oh, we got a new rice cooker, and for the first time, I bought one that isn't from an Asian brand. I think mine was German, and it felt so
Oh,
weird.
oh, does it work?
So yeah, yes, it's working, but it's
Okay,
just
that's
it's just weird to
yeah,
not have it be Japanese or Korean.
yeah,
Okay,
yes.
so most underrated tourist attraction or activity in Indonesia.
Oh, going to a local cafe. So in recent years, we've had like an abundance of like local cafes. popping up everywhere, and they're like beautiful. Like I haven't gone to like a more beautiful cafe in like England or anything, because there's not much else to do in Jakarta, to be honest. So everyone is just like going to like really nice restaurants and cafes. So that is like the number one thing you have to do.
Got it. I see when our friends travel to Indonesia, I see them try like these little coffee samplers from your
Yeah.
cafes.
Mhm.
I think these are really pretty. Okay, and
Mhm.
lastly, what's a local superstition you take seriously?
Hmm. I don't know. This came from Singapore. So like the saying like knock on wood. So then when we were in Singapore, there's this like it's kind of like an ongoing joke where so in Chinese, when you call someone like mu tou, it means like wooden head, and it just means like someone who's slow, like to get things. So then and then people started like knocking on like their heads to be like when they're like, oh, knock on wood, because you don't readily have like wood available to like knock on sometimes. So and like until now, like if I have like an unlucky thought or or whatever,
No,
I'll like just tap on my head. Yeah.
that's interesting. That's so clever. It's, I like it didn't come from something clever. That's super clever. Okay, thank you for playing fast talk with me.
Yeah.
Before we wrap, I have a few more questions for you. Um, these are fully booked author questions. So, first off, what are three books that you always recommend?
Oh, always. I don't know about always because they're always changing. So I would say the last few books I read that were really good. So I read the other Black Girl, that was really good, and I would highly recommend that. Oh, and I just finished reading Such a Fun Age, which is amazing. Like I think like so many people need to read this book because it's like it really examines racial inequality in America, and how like even the most well-meaning people can inadvertently like cause harm. And then of course my like go-to like my Bible is Gone Girl. Like everyone needs to read it because it's brilliant. So yeah.
Yes, definitely. I haven't read the first two. I will add them to my list. But Gone Girl is just something else. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What's the best thing
Game
about
changer.
being a writer?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, there have been so many good things. I guess I would say that I genuinely, okay, so like my husband works like a normal job, I guess. And like it's not, like he's good at it, but it's not really like something like he dreams about and is obsessed by. So I would say
Yeah.
like that's the best thing about being a writer is that it's it was a dream, and now it's here. And I have not had a day where I sit and I think like, oh, I wish I could be like doing something else. Yeah.
Yes. I can relate very much. It's like once you finally live the dream, it's like why would I ever want anything else? Even on my worst day,
Mm-hmm.
I would never trade it for
Yeah.
anything else. So,
Yes.
jumping off of that, what is the most important lesson that you learned as an author that you want to share with aspiring writers?
Mm, the most important lesson is okay. So when I was an aspiring writer, I used to think like, oh, well, once I get published, then, my life would be amazing and wonderful, like just so glamorous and whatever. Okay. So that doesn't happen. I mean, I don't know, maybe if you like maybe if you live in the US, and you're in the center of like the publishing hub, maybe that might happen. But if you live in outside anywhere outside of the US, it's just not gonna be like that glamorous. And there wasn't like any real like sudden changes to my life. So keep trying to get there, but also like don't forget to enjoy your life like right now.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
And for our last question for today, the fully booked signature question. Do you judge a book by its cover?
Yeah, I know you're not supposed to, but like if a cover is like so beautiful, I would totally pick up the book based on that. Yeah.
Right?
Like,
They're so
yeah, I mean,
yummy.
yes. And I remember when I first saw the cover of Wilder Girls, I was like, "What? That is
Yes,
gorgeous!"
that
And
was
I couldn't stop thinking about it, and that made me like pick it up and give the book a try. So yeah, like a good cover, so essential.
Yes, I totally agree. And congratulations on both your covers being very compelling
Yes,
and
thank
very,
you.
uh, like so yummy. Please pick me.
Mhm.
Um, so that's it for me and for Fully Booked. Is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
Thank you so much
Where
for
can we
having me
find you
here.
and such?
Oh, right. Well, you can find me on Twitter. I am at the Writing Hippo on Twitter, and on Instagram, I am at Jessie Q Sutanto. Um, and on TikTok, I am at Jessie Sutanto. I'm so sorry that they're all different. It was because I signed up for TikTok with Jessie Q Sutanto, and then I forgot my password, and then I never figured out how to log back
Get it
in.
back.
I'm so old. Technology is like beyond me.
It's okay. In a little while, we're going to be the aunties.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jesse, and to everyone who hung out with us this Friday
Hmm.
night. Don't forget, you can purchase your copy of Dial A for Aunties and pre-order for Aunties in a Wedding at 15% off on fullybookedonline.com. This promo only runs from March 25th to 27th to 2022, so get your books now. Take care, everyone. Good night, and keep on reading. Bye.
Bye.